We're here with Errol Jonsson. Errol, just to get an idea, where were you born? Where are you originally from?
I was born in Crystal City,
What year?
1920.
1920. Okay. And then did you grow up here your entire life? And
Yes.
went to high school here?
What time I wasn't in A&M and in the service.
Okay. And when you graduated from high school, what led you to A&M? Why'd you decide to go there?
Well, it was just, I had been up there visiting on different occasions with the agricultural group.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked school, and I liked the way the boys were, and I liked the military school.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, what year did you enter A&M?
I entered in 39.
Okay. 39, that's isn't that when they won the national championship?
Right. That's right. I didn't think I could ever lose after that.
That was a good year to come in. They had who was it? Was it John Kimbrough or
Yeah.
Kim? Yeah.
Joy John. Well, they had some fine players on there, though. Robnett and Spivey and Cullen Rogers. There were just a lot of good players. Duke Pugh.
Mm-hmm.
Very fine men.
Were any of the football players in your outfit, or they?
No, they were in various organizations or batteries companies and whatnot over on campus, but they lived separately in another building.
Okay.
And then went to their different organizations for maneuvers and intelligence and military science.
Okay. All right. When did you meet Mr. Stalling? Were y'all in the same?
Well, that second day I was up there.
All right.
Yeah, we moved into the same dorm and known him ever since. It's
Where is he originally from? Is he originally from Crystal
no,
City?
no, he's from Lufkin.
Lufkin. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
He was not my roommate. I was rooming with a guy named Pinkerton, and he was a veterinarian. And being such, he had to study all night and on up into 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And it kind of interfered with my lifestyle. so I changed roommates and got Max Rotholtz. And he and I roomed together for the rest of our college career.
Okay.
And house stalling was always either next door or across the hall.
So would that mean that y'all were in the same?
Oh yeah, we were in the same F battery field artillery.
F battery field artillery.
Yeah, horse drawn.
Okay. Do you still keep up with a lot of the guys that were in your?
Yeah, through the Aggie News, I do. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see.
I see them on different occasions. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I might accidentally meet them, or I just may. We'll attend the same convention or the same party or something, and
Mm-hmm.
see them again.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure.
Well, if you entered in '39, when would you say like you were? It became aware to you that like that war was coming, and I mean, were events in Europe more prevalent at the time?
Yeah, it was. They were bickering about it, well into it by that time, but in 41, why our military science classes and things included news release, and we always had a colonel or that rank or above as our instructors. They were well up on what goes on in the world of military, and they were not retired, but they were a little bit too old to be active in the ranks, and so they put them into teaching and instruction, the rest of us, and they were very competent. They were good.
Mm-hmm.
And they kept us briefed daily on the news, the reports, and the guys in Baton and Corregidor and all over.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly, our bad news was coming out of the Pacific Theater, because that was the year before when that was the year of the attack on Pearl Harbor.
You were
41.
You were in school when on December 7th, 41.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember where you were and how you learned of the news? Do you remember where you were specifically and how you learned of the news?
Yeah, I had been to a movie in Bryan. We got back to the dorm and it was blaring on the radio when we got in that afternoon. And that's how I found out.
Hmm. And let's see, did you go all the way through A&M? Did you graduate before you?
Yeah, I was to graduate in 43, but we didn't go, we went to school year round after that. We went summer and winter and the whole bit, and there was no vacation. To speed up our graduation, which they did, and we graduated in, I believe it was January of 42. So we were way ahead of schedule. We graduated and immediately, of course. They told us we could come home and relax for a few days and wait for a call. And that call wasn't long in coming, like 4 or 5 days.
Well, did you have any sense of like when you learned of the news of the attack? Did you think, okay, this is definitely going to happen now, and I'm probably going to go to the Pacific, or did you
Of course.
Did you have any idea?
No, I didn't have any idea where I would go. I would go wherever I was sent. But definitely we knew we were going. And we questioned the military people that were our instructors about just dropping out right now and going. You know, we were all eager to get into the thing. And they insisted that their instructions were from the military people that were running the war, that we stay in school. We were so near finished that we need to finish and get those degrees, and then be an officer in the Army rather than just soldiers that we were too far advanced. In other words, we'd had nearly 3 years of military science, and we knew a good deal about it. We were all the marching and all that stuff was simple, but we knew a lot about firing guns and war too. In fact, I helped the colonel. He knew I was a deer hunter and come out of South Texas. He asked me one day after class if I would mind going with him to try out a gun he'd building. I told him, no, I'd be glad to. We went out somewhere and he had a regular rifle set up on a rotating stand where I could sit and aim the rifle. He said, I'm just not steady enough anymore to do this. I want you to do it. So I had made a perfect score with the rifle. But anyway, he would release balloons and I would track them and fire. Well, what happened was the deal I was holding in my hand was nothing but the rifle to my shoulder, and that's all. But it was hooked up to a machine gun over there about 8 or 9 feet away. And it was oriented to move with my stand. And when I was on target, the machine gun was on target.
Oh, okay.
And that was his idea of an anti-aircraft gun. And as it turned out, that's exactly what they didn't use his idea, but they had those gun turrets, that swirl around. But theirs were, they were on hydraulics and automatics and everything else.
Yeah.
And ours, I had to move it myself. But anyway, he was Colonel Bowles. He was a very fine man, and we liked him, all of us. But he advanced his theory a little bit. I'm sure he sent it in.
So they sped you up and you graduated in January 42?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens next?
Well, I went home, and as I said, it took them about 5 days to get us a telegram that we were to report to Army base so-and-so, and I don't remember the one I went to in San Antonio, but it wasn't, I just don't remember which one it was, but it was just a recruiting base there where they handle new recruits. And I was relieved to see that most of my class was right there with me. And they were like maybe 100 or 150 of us in that one base. A lot of them went down to Beauregard, Louisiana, and places like that, to wherever there were good, big Army base. But anyway, we stayed there in San Antonio maybe a week. They were teaching us to march, and they were teaching us what the cadence were, and they were teaching us all these things. And so the first day we got out there and had a private going to teach us how to march and so forth. And I asked him to let me see if we didn't already know that, so we wouldn't have to go through it again. So we did a little marching around there, and he said, well, I don't believe I can improve on that. Anyway, we stayed there about a week and got our orders to report to Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Okay.
That was the artilleryman. All the artillery went to Fort Sill. Now, some of the rest of them went to Fort Benning and California and all over the world. They were sent to their various training centers where they had been trained, what they had been trained in. Infantry, cavalry, artillery, engineering, or whatever. Well, they sent them to the Army post where they could do the most good.
So you went into, I mean, it's the Army. You're not going into a different branch of the service.
No, I went to the Army.
Did most of your classmates go into the Army, or did some go
Oh,
into?
yeah.
Okay. But you
Now,
went.
a lot of them went to the Air Corps, of course.
Okay.
Army Air Force.
Okay.
But that's where we were. We didn't have Navy at that time in school.
Okay.
There was no Navy in school at that time.
Where did Mr. Stalling go?
Hal went to Fort Sill.
Were you in San Antonio together as well?
No, he came up from Louisiana or from Houston. I don't recall which, but he was in Fort Sill, and Max Rothwell, Jack Conger, a whole bunch that was in the artillery. We went to Fort Sill because it's an artillery training center,
Okay.
and that's where we went. I spent probably 8 or 9 months training troops, recruits, and more or less weeding them out. The people that were unsuitable and so forth were let go home, because they wouldn't have been any use to the service. And we taught those boys how to do a lot of things, and then we got off into they said they had a special school if we wanted to go to it, and it was a mule pack. I told them, yeah, that sounded good to me. I've been in mules all my life. But anyway, Hal, and Jack Conger, and Max and I all signed up for it. Well, we had an old fellow there named Captain Howard that wants to, incidentally, we had already been through OCS, 90 days of it and all that, and gotten our commissions. We were all second lieutenant.
Second lieutenant?
Yeah, at that time. Well, I skipped over that part, but anyway, as soon as we hit Fort Sill, we went to school. That was our purpose. And we graduated from that, and all of us got our rank as second lieutenant commission, and then we went to these various different technical parts of the service, some into the signal, some into the engineering and all that stuff of artillery. And I signed up and went to the mule pack. Jack Conger, Max Rothos, and Hal, all of us. Well, Jack couldn't stay because he was about 5'6", 5'7", and they said that he had to transfer out to a mechanized unit because they required us to weigh over 180 pounds and be at least 5'11" or 6, and the taller the better. And of course, Hal and Max both qualified, but they didn't have the experience of riding horseback like I had all my life, and though Captain Howard weeded people out according to their ability to handle animals and so forth, and he advised Max and Hal to go to another organization, which they did. Anyway, I mean, it wasn't any big deal. But anyway, I stayed in the mule pack and trained those guys to pack mules and out in the hills and Medicine Bluff mountains and things at Fort Sill. And between their being raw recruits and rattlesnakes and things out there, they learned a lot. They learned an awful lot, and they made fine soldiers. They were just an occasional guy that would be a dropout, but we trained some mighty fine young men there.
Were you training them to go to a specific place?
Yeah, for mule pack. I didn't realize why we were there at the time, but this Captain Howard, he was a sergeant in the Army, and they promoted him to captain, so he could train these troops and have a rank over any of us, which was fine because he was a fine man, and I'm sure he was a fine soldier. but he knew mule packing. And he knew a little bit about service because he had been in the Philippines and he had been in Burma and India. And he had come home. He was not physically able to be there anymore. And he put us through some pretty rigorous training on mountain slides and things, horseback, going down those things. And sometimes the horse would just go head over heels, and the rider would go one way and the horse go the other way. But it all worked out, and we got out of that anyway. And he then took what he wanted of us and taught us everything he knew about packing. So we become pack pen. And then I used that knowledge to train those troops and things and teach them how to tie all the loads on pack saddles and how to load a mule and break the guns down and load them on the mules and load the ammunition and do all that stuff. And then we had tarps to protect it, like we'd tarp the ammunition to keep it from getting wet and weathered. And it's pretty tricky tying those loads on with ropes and things where they wouldn't move and they wouldn't hurt that mule. That was a prime consideration. Don't hurt the mule. Mm-hmm. So those guys really learned it, and they even know it today. I go to these reunions once in a while, and I'm supposed to go to one this year. I hope I can make it. But I've been to Ohio, I've been to Colorado Springs twice, in Ohio, visited all that country, and it's interesting to talk to those guys. Mm-hmm. They were a fine bunch of men, and they're all successful businessmen.
Well, so you're training at Fort Sill, and then where are you off to after that?
Well, after I trained the troops, and we had we trained maybe 300-400 in those years. We'd give them like 60 to 90 days of intense training after they learned to march. Mm-hmm. And then I got orders to report to Camp Gruber, Oklahoma, being transferred. Well, I didn't know why, but I got up to Camp Gruber at Muskogee, and there were crews in there building just fast as they could the houses. And that's how incomplete it was and what a hurry they were in. And actually, that's where the group was to be formed to go to Burma. And I began to ring a bell on me then that this was going to be a small unit, a small group, so to speak, and with a special job. So anyway, we went to Camp River, set up a camp, and we had to build our stables and things. It was just so much to do. In fact, when I got there, the colonel told me to build some sidewalks. Well, I wasn't a mason expert. I got a little detail of men, and we had access to some vehicles to haul materials. And they had a good rock up there that we used. We made all those sidewalks and things out of rocks, and we put a patio by each kitchen so the cook could have a dry place to work outside. And I don't know how many thousands of feet of sidewalks and patios we built, but there was a lot. And we finally got through with that job. And then we started building those stables. And to put our saddles and mules in, we had to build stables to accommodate 100 mules. So that's a lot of mules. You have feed bunkers and things to put in and oat bins and whatnot. Well, we got that done real quick. We didn't fool around. And after that, why, we began to get our equipment. And we got some of it in, and then we got I got an order to go down to Fort Sill and pick up the mules. So I got down there, and there was a movie star there, and I don't recall his name, but he was a major, and he was a character. And Scott, he had hired about 20 professional bronc busters. I mean, they were like big time, best in the world at riding broncs. And they told us that those mules would be broke when we got them. And I sat there and I watched that major, and he would have those little guys come out with their regular old stock saddles, and they had spurs on, and they had chaps. They didn't have uniforms. They had chaps and leggings and things. They'd come out of there on those old mules, and some of them would buck around that corral and go 2/3 of the way around before they'd stall and start walking.
Mm-hmm.
There's a guy jump off of them, and the old colonel said, he's fine, take him out. They were broke. When we got them over to our place in Muskogee, that was at Fort Reno, Oklahoma. It's where the mules were delivered. And I picked up 260, 70 mules. Real fine, big, strong animals. They were like 15, 16, 17 hands. They were big devils, weighing 1,100 pounds. Big Missouri mules, all bred for that purpose. And they were all young. I doubt if they were, age would run over 28 months at the most.
Mm-hmm.
We took 80 some odd head of them in my organization, and the colonel issued an order that those mules to be broke to the saddle, to ride. Well, that was something I had planned on, and we had these guys from New York and Pennsylvania and Baltimore and Boston. And they said, "What's a mule?" You know, they were serious. Hell, it's a hybrid between a horse and a burro. And all I could tell. Anyway, he said ride them. So we saddled one up and cinched him up, and I said, "Now, fellas, just got to get on these mules and stay on there. They're not hard to ride." After I said that, I knew I'd made a mistake. They said, "Well, ride him." So I climbed on him, and I was real lucky. I got one that he just bowed up and made about 3 crow hops and stopped. And I immediately got off of him. I said, "See, there's nothing to it." Well, it was chaotic there for a long time because we had a 4-ring circus going. 4 or 5 saddle mules at one time, and all those new recruits breaking them. This went on for about 4 or 5 days, and really and truly the mules were broke after that. They were, and we assigned a mule to each 2 or 3 men, or each group of men, and they were responsible to take care of them, see that he's fed and groomed and shod and everything. And then we began our training to load the mules with pack saddles and so forth. We had a few mules that rebelled, and we had to discard them, but very few. And we taught them to take the pack saddle. Now, that pack saddle weighed 94.5 pounds. That's pretty heavy for a saddle. And I found out why. They said they wanted men that were 6 foot high. There was one man on each side, and they'd raise the saddle high enough to clear the mule and walk over. Start from the back and walk over. and set it down in the proper place near his withers, shoulders. And those pack saddles we'd cinch them up, and that's what we packed our loads on. And there were usually 6 or 7 men in a crew, 7 preferably, for each mule. The reason for that was each had a job to do. They had a job in lifting the gun. The barrel of the gun, for instance, went on one mule because it was awfully heavy. The barrel weighed 222 pounds by itself. And the mule already had 94 pounds on his back, so you know they were pretty well loaded. And these guys would we had some steel bars, well, I'd say they were inch and a half in diameter, and some eyes on the tube of the gun, front and back. We'd run the bars through there, and then they'd carry it up over the mule and set it on the saddle. And there was some special hinges and things that we flapped it down tight on there. And each piece of the gun had to be done that way, and there were 6 loads.
What size? What's the gun?
75 millimeter howitzer. You see them fired at these football games and things.
Oh, okay.
That's the 75 millimeter howitzer on the little wheels with spokes in it.
Right.
That's exactly what we had.
Okay.
And we loaded them. We loaded them according to the way that the weight mostly. The rear trail was the lightest load. So in addition to that, we'd put the wheels and some other things on him. Mm-hmm. And we brought them all up to over 300 pounds on the load, every one of them. So that's the reason for big men and big mules. And incidentally, these men, after they had been with that mule for 4 or 5 months, and by the time we got overseas, they'd fight you if you hurt their mule, because they loved that mule.
Right.
And we tried to instill on them that without that mule, there was no war for us. Mm-hmm. He was our main guy, and without him, we couldn't go. Now, they did. They really enjoyed those mules after they learned how intelligent they were and everything, and how docile they were. Mm-hmm. And you could just almost talk to them. And we had firing problems, and we would we'd have them in line and so forth, get a fire mission order, and in training I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And we immediately, those guys leading the mules would form a circle and back them up, and there was mules that never moved. They just stand right there until you got all the load off. And they would pick the gun, take the wheels off, take the axle on the front trail, and then they'd get the hydraulic cylinder and all that stuff off the gun. There were 6 major pieces, and those guys got to where they could. When we got a fire mission and the mules acted so well, they would form that little circle, and then immediately 2 or 3 guys would take them and lead them back out of the way. Mm-hmm. And they got to where they could take those guns off the mules after an order and get around in the air in about a minute and 20 seconds.
Wow.
It was that quick. I mean, they just slapped that thing together. And the mules were so obedient. The guns were made and designed to go together. When you slap them together right, you could do it. If you made one bobble, one mistake, and dropped a piece or something, you got trouble. Mm-hmm. But these guys were so good and so strong. We had men in there, Scott, that would in feeding those mules. We got our oat in 3 pound in 3 bushel sacks. And a bushel weighs 31 pounds, 32 pounds on good oats. We had some men in there that pick a sack under each arm and walk over there and pour it in the trough. They were powerful, man. It's such a pleasure to work with them. But anyway, we went on with that training, and we went night marches and all that stuff for several weeks. And by that time, we were the 5332nd Brigade. And we were brand new. Go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry. I had a quick question about the gun. How do you fire that gun that size? Like, how do you fire it with how do you target? How do you shoot at the target? And how's the accuracy?
Shell, the ammunition, were in cases. They were in a brass case shell. Now, they come with 7 powder charges. Well, depending on the range that we were going to fire and so forth, we would say charge 3, which means that they take out 4, leave 3. And charge 5, in other words, going on out to 1,800, 2,000 yards. Well, we'd use charge 5, 6, or 7. But 7, even with 7, those little guns wouldn't quite reach 4 miles. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't go. Because when we got over in Burma, we had a bridge that we were trying to blow, and we couldn't reach it. We just fell a little short.
Well, did having to take them apart and reassemble them so many times affect their accuracy?
No.
No?
No. Because the gun sight is protected.
Okay.
The gun sight. And we have a gunner on there, on each unit, on each section, we call them. And the gunner, he operated the gun sight. We'd have a target, 0 point out here. And I would line the battery up. I did all that myself. I'd put the pole out there, and then those guys would go from there, and I'd tell them where the pole was. They'd zero in on it, and I'd give them a deflection from there. And that would turn the guns one way or another. And they were very accurate. We used mils instead of degrees. I believe there's 6,400 mils in a circle.
Okay.
Yeah. You can imagine how. So
that's precise.
It gave us a lot more accuracy, and those gun sights were very, very good. But we got to where we could shoot pretty straight with them, I'll tell you. And, the deeper we got into the thing, and the more they learned, the more interesting it was to the troops and everybody. And they got out of the basic training part of it, and they were satisfied they had to go on. But the initial training is always the worst part. When you begin to learn and finish up and see why you're doing it. And the Army has peculiar ways, and they have slow ways, but they get the job done. They have something that you don't realize. They're going after a certain goal. And then troops never realize that until they get there. And they can't advertise it. They have to just keep telling them. So anyway, we spent our time there at Muskogee, Camp Gruber. And from there, we were ordered to, on our first leg to, we went from there to Colorado Springs, and we trained there in the mountains. We had to go into the mountains because we were heading into a mountain country. And all this stuff was basically as close to the conditions we were going into as the Army could get it. In Oklahoma, we got all the flat land and all the heat and all the cold and things you can imagine, and more rainfall than normal down here. So anyway, it was pretty well planned. And then they took us into Colorado Springs.
When was this? Was this 43 or 42 still, or what year was it? I mean, what time?
This was in 42,
Okay.
and we went to Colorado Springs, and we went back into the mountains to learn more about mountain terrain. And that's where we were going. And I began to wonder where we were going, because why should we have to train in the mountains in this cold, isolated place up here? But it all came together, and we had rigorous marches. We'd go up those mountains and down and so forth with the mules always. And we'd take, 10, 15-mile march, and didn't take us long to accomplish that. We had a little old place out of camp there. I think it was 10 miles, and I don't remember. I had a record of that one time, but it seemed like in about 2 hours and 45 minutes we'd get there and stuff like that. I mean, we just got to where we were very proficient at it. And it toughened up our legs and our boots and our feet, and everything got toughened up for what we were heading into. We trained there for like a month or two, and firing problems in those mountains is entirely different from Oklahoma. In fact, I was assigned a problem with the artillery, and they told me where my gun was, and they told me where I was, and the target's over there. Well, what it was, the guns were right here on the peak of a mountain, and I was standing on the same mountain in front of them. And then there was this tremendous valley, like 2,000 feet down into the valley. And they identified the target, and they said, well, now see how quick you can get on that target. So I thought, it's going to be too hard, and I gave them a deflection, an elevation, and a sight. And they fired it, and I still don't know where that shell hit. I heard the explosion, but I declare I couldn't. I turned up and made it, and I said, Murdy, where do you think that? He said, well, you got to get it on that target. And I said, well, I think it went about 1,000 yards over or somewhere. I don't see any evidence of it. And he said, well, let me help you a little. And he said, tell them to go down 300 in that sight. And 300 was a tremendous drop. That's like lowering the gun this much.
Gosh.
So I ordered another round. Well, sure enough, he was right. I could see it hit him with that. So anyway, we got on the target. But it was such a different thing, firing in the mountains as firing on the ground. Mm-hmm. The air was thinner, the shells went further, and being up high and shooting down low, it was a big, big difference. Mm-hmm. So we went through that for quite a while, fired lots of problems out there, and got proficient again with it. And so they decided we'd go on. From there, we went to, we were ordered to port of embarkation at California. I guess that was Anza that we went to. It was right near Hollywood, in that area. I don't remember exactly the name of it, but I know we had a few days waiting for the ship that was going to take us over. And we visited Hollywood and Vine and San Bernardino, all around that area. We rent cars and whatnot, and drive over. And a very interesting country, very pretty country. And then we, anyway, got our orders to ship out, and we were to get on that boat, ship at night. And then we were gonna slip out under the cover of darkness and all that stuff, you know. So we did. We boarded the ship late in the evening. It was tied up to the dock there, of course. We got into our quarters and whatnot and went to sleep. Well, I slept pretty good. Next morning, there was one guy next to me, and he was so sick. And I said, well, what's the matter? He said, man, I can't stand this sea. He said, I hope we're not too far from land. I'd jump off and swim back. I'd already been up on top. I said, well, you don't have to swim back. I said, we're still tied to the dock. Mentally, he had been sailing all night, and he'd already conjured up a big sickness, and it was really funny. And he even got a laugh out of it.
Oh, goodness.
But all the secrecy was blown anyway, and we sailed out of there at broad daylight. We went down by Australia.
At what point are you aware where you're going?
I knew then where I was going.
Okay.
I'd already been told. But I didn't know how we'd get there. And they didn't tell the plans of the ship, but the ship was brand new. It was made for that purpose and to haul troops. And it was made with speed so that they could outrun U-boats. And that's the reason, and we took off alone in the ocean. And no escorts and no battleships or anything else to take care of us. We were on our own.
How many men?
And we didn't have, we had 5,500 men.
Oh my gosh.
And a ship's crew of 1,270 on that ship.
What's the name of a ship like that?
it's a troop ship.
Okay.
USS General Butner.
USS Butler.
Butner, Butner.
And you had
We went from there, and we went in a straight line, and then they began to zigzag when we got out near the equator and the international date line all through there. And I asked the lieutenants and the ship people, you know, what's the purpose of it? And said, well, they got a little inkling that there might be some Japanese in here, and they're trying to locate them on radar and whatnot. And so there wasn't any problem with it. That old ship just kept rolling, and they were moving pretty fast. We went from California to Australia, and we stopped in Sydney. After we got across the international date line, why we thought we had it made, and the equator, it was hot and so forth. But every evening about 4 o'clock, we had to close ship. In other words, there'd be no lights, no smoking, and nobody above deck, nobody in the open after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So that was a long time before that 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning come around, we were allowed to get out of that thing. And 5,000 men shut up in there is not easy. And there were approximately 30 women aboard. They were Waves or Red Cross. There were a lot of those girls over there. And we met some of them. I enjoyed visiting with one, but she was an exceptional fine bridge player. And I never played bridge in my life. But she taught me to play bridge. So she'd have someone there that, for a partner. Well, anyway, she was really great at that game. And we went on that way, and they had a little gymnasium on the ship, and it was down on the bottom deck, which was about 3 decks above the top. And I had a ship man down there one day, and I was working out on the punch bags and doing a few things, and a friend of mine, one of the liaison pilots that observed fire for us, he went down there with me, and he said, let's put the gloves on and you teach me how to box a little. I said, I don't know how to teach anybody to box. Just knock hell out of you. Next time don't let me do it. Anyway, we did that for a while, and I asked that sailor, I said, boy, it's nice and cool down here. He said, well, it ought to be. We're 40 feet below the surface. And I said, well, is that the way we came in? Is that the only way out of here? And he said, yeah. And that was to climb a ladder and go through a hole about this big. That was the only way out. And I looked around, there was about 40 people in there. I said, I believe I'm just going to go back up on top, and that's what I did. And I never did go back down there because I could just see that old ship getting torpedoed, and I couldn't. And there's no way that they could have ever gotten out of there.
Gosh.
But anyway, fortunately it wasn't. It didn't happen. We stopped in Australia, and we were told that we'd had some time there that we would be allowed to leave the ship, but stay within range of a mile so we could get back on board. I decided to go, and I'd like to just tour around, and I got off the ship, walked off the gangplank, and stepped on soil there, and it horn blared on that ship. It said, everybody aboard, we're leaving Australia. And I just turned around and walked back on the ship as everybody else did, and sure enough, in about an hour, well, we were back in the ocean. And we went from Australia, we went up on kind of on the west side of India. We went into, we were down here, and we went up this way. We went up, onto the west side of India, over in here.
Okay.
And went to Bombay. When we left down here, it started up. Of course, we didn't know where we were, but the Japanese were very, very in control of a lot of this country in here, in the Netherlands Indies. Now they had the Philippines, and they were working at Borneo, and they had all this country. In French Indochina and up in there even. So we skirted them and went around, but we had a little excitement aboard ship, and the captain had ordered. We noticed that 2 little fast cruisers come along beside us, one on each side. Of course, they were so fast, they just zip by us and make tours up there, and they had a message that they were a submarine in the area, and they were trying to protect troops. And they dropped some of the ash cans and whatnot, those ships did. But we never experienced any gunfire from submarines, nor submarines, missiles, or anything that they might have had. They never fired at us, I don't believe. So we got on up and went to Bombay. that's where we landed. We debarked in Bombay and went from there to, well, we had a night or two in with our stuff, with our equipment on board, our personal equipment and so forth. And we used it for a base rather than a hotel or something. We just stayed with the ship because we were going to be moving out quickly. And the reason we had to stay there was that the train we were going to take up to India, up through India, the railroad track had washed out the flood. Well, they finally got us on another deal where we could go around it and get on up above. And we didn't have any mules with us. We were just people. And we went on around it, and we got on one of those little narrow gauge railroads and headed up into India, and we went to Ramgarh, India. In Ramgarh, we stayed there a few days, and we had some time to kill because our mules were coming by those old Liberty ships that they had. They were coming about the same route we came. It would take them forever because they're so slow. And I think they lost 2 loads of mules. Those ships were blown out of the water. But they didn't lose any troops. The men, they were going in convoy, so they were picked up, but we did lose the mules. And we were kind of delaying, waiting till we could get replacements. So we went to Ramgarh, and we stayed there for quite a few days in Ramgarh. And we did some training as what we could there, but we didn't have any equipment or anything to train with. And one thing I remember about Ramgarh was the black birds that was up there about the size of a crow or a raven. And when we'd get our mess kits over in the chow line, we'd get our mess kits. If you didn't immediately put the lid on it or hold it close to you, the bird knocked it out of your hand. I'm telling you, it was fierce the way those birds come in on you. So we learned right quick to watch the birds. And we left there, and we flew with we had some equipment then. We flew with our guns and things down to Michino. And our mules were landing in Calcutta on those Liberty ships. And they would be going overland then on rail as far as they could. But then the Japs had so much of that territory and they couldn't get close. They had to stay away from them. And we got our mules, same ones we had when we left. In my battery, all our mules were alive and well, and we got the same ones we had before that we trained with. And that was good. Mm-hmm. And we got those after we had been in Michino about 30 days. Our mules came in. They came in from Lido. They came up in there by rail, and then they had to walk them down the road. General Stilwell had they were still fighting. And these guys brought those mules down, but they had an escort, a good escort of those. Some of them were Merrill's Marauders and General Stilwell's troops. And of course, they'd been there, and they were so sick and tired of that war that they were dissipated. But they were real fighters and real good soldiers. We got to Michino. The Japs had just barely lost control of that airstrip. In fact, they told us whenever this plane hits the ground, get all your gear and have it on your back and be ready to head for shelter. So that's what we did. That plane landed and they dropped that ramp. We bailed out of that thing and headed for an area over there where there was give us some protection. And then we went on out to the Irrawaddy River and camped on the banks of that river for, I'd say, 30 to 50 days. Mm-hmm. Waiting on the mules and waiting to get everything lined up before we shoved off, because it was the last time we were going to see a roadway or an airport for many, many days. And we did, we got that, and we fired a few problems around there and got used to the jungle, and you never get used to the rain though. It rained so much over there that overnight you could pull your boots off clean and put them under your cot or bed or whatever you had. And the next morning you had to scrape the green mold out of them.
Yeah.
Overnight. And I'll guarantee you that a lot of them went crippled because they didn't do it. They didn't clean them up and they didn't spray their feet. And it was that wet. I think the year that we were there, they said it rained 312 inches.
Gosh. It's heavy.
And every day that I was on the Irrawaddy River there at Michigan, you could set your watch by the rain. Mm. At 2:45, it was going to rain from 1 to 5 inches.
Gosh.
And it wouldn't take it long to do it. It would do that in an hour and a half, 2 hours. You could walk anywhere after that. 5 minutes later, you didn't get any mud on you or nothing. All the soil had washed off. It was just as hard as this table. It didn't bother you. Yeah. In fact of the matter, we left there, heading into our creek down to the Burr Road. We went into a rice paddy that was waist deep. And I don't know how far we walked across that thing. It was at least a mile or two. We'd see fish in there that were 12 to 18 inches long, swimming all around us. It was just amazing. And those mules, they didn't hesitate. They just went right on with us.
All right.
And we crossed rivers, we made floats, and we did everything in the world, I guess, that you can do on a trip like that. But the streams over there, some of them were pretty swift and treacherous. That Swaley River was really a booger. We had a lot of trouble. Mm-hmm. We got mules down slides and going into the water and a lot of things. But we got through it. And we didn't, to my knowledge, we didn't lose any mules ourselves, and I don't think any of the rest of them did.
There's a photo in there of a...
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's Mars Task Force. Yeah, that's part of our group. That's what we were known as. Mm-hmm. And that's a packed out group there with all the rigging, and each man carried whatever he ate. Those mules wasn't carrying food and bedding for the men. We had to carry our own.
I wonder if there's another. You know what? I think that's the photo actually.
But, there's a lot of information. I don't know. I didn't even look it up. But Joe Stone said he wanted some, and I had a deal that thick. I gave it to him. He brought it back. He said, "Where'd you get all that junk?" I said, "Well, I didn't get it. One of my men was a historian of the company, and he went over to Washington, D.C. and got into the archives and got it there." I had no idea. I wouldn't have known to look in it. But he did. He got all this information. Tremendous amount of stuff.
Wow.
But anyway, we We followed game trails when we got into the mountains. We got out of the rice paddies and got into the mountains. Well, we had to use the elephant trails. They were basically right down the top of those ridges, right on the peak where it breaks both ways. And that's the way the animals travel because they had the advantage over anything that tried to attack them or anything. And also, they knew where the water was. So we used that. And we had from Missional, we had Kachin Rangers that we hired to guide us and fight with us. And we had, of course, interpreters to tell us what these other people were saying and doing and so forth.
Did you have to have like, I don't know, like a vet or two on hand? I mean, for your
We had
mules?
several, many veterinarians.
Okay. And were they had to be
Yeah,
fighting?
see, we had 900 head of mules.
Okay.
And we had, I'm going to say we had probably 20 veterinarians.
Okay.
And the cavalry, they were over on one side, and I was with the 476th Infantry. We were in support of that regiment. And the cavalry, they had their artillery and support over there with them. And I guess that was the 613th Field Artillery Battalion, but I was with the 612th. And all these different groups made the brigade. A brigade is not a big unit. It's probably, I'm going to guess 3,000 men, more or less. I don't really know how. I know we had an infantry regiment. And in a regiment there were 4 battalions. Yeah, there was more than that. It'd probably be closer to 6,000, 7,000. I don't know how many. But anyway, brigade strength. It wasn't division strength. And we went on down the road. A lot of the cavalrymen had a real problem. If they got the easy part, they went down. I say the easy part, it was probably the hard part. But they went down some roads for quite a long ways. There was cart trails and things that the natives used over there, and they stayed in that flatland where they could do that. And we had been trained in the mountains, so they set us in the mountains. We went one way, and those guys went another, and we were to meet way down the road. And I'm going to say it was right near Christmas, or just before. My unit got an order with a battalion of infantry and my battery. They sent us over to Tonquin, which was offspring from the main route. But the Chinese 50th Division was over there fighting Japs, and they ordered us to go over there and assist the Chinese and relieve them so they could get their division together and move into another area. It really wasn't much of a fight. We got into position that night, and we got some mortar rounds that caught us kind of by surprise. In fact, we didn't have foxhole or anything to get in, and those mortars hit right near our picket line and right amongst our troops, but nobody was seriously injured, and the mules were hit, and there's some of them scratched up, but they weren't where they couldn't be used. We used them and healed them. But anyway, that was our first taste of combat, and I had to move back. I was in such heavy jungle that I couldn't fire. The trees were so big and so tall around me. We moved in at night. Well, the next morning I looked around, there's no way I can get around out of here. So I moved back about 150, 200 yards, a little ridge back there and some low brush. And then we got to firing. And I don't know, we didn't, in 5 or 6 days it was over with. No Jap pulled out of there.
How far away from what's the distance between the two of you, between the Japs and where you are?
Well, when we first got there, it wasn't very far because I didn't know where we were, and neither did the captain. And we moved in position. I didn't realize it, but the infantry were just, say, 150, 200 feet ahead of me. And they were right up breast of the Japanese.
Oh.
And so even though little knee mortars reached my picket line, and that's not supposed to happen. Mm-hmm. But we hacked on the ground there, and that old ground was just as hard. We had those little old shovels, we carry. Yeah, I picked at it a little bit and I thought, oh, what the hell, they're not going to bother us. I laid that shovel down, and about that time those knee mortars began to hit. Well, that softened the ground a whole lot. And I wanted to shoot back so bad. I told Captain, I said, Captain, I got to move back out of here because I'll go back near the maintenance section. It's about 150 yards back there, but it was a little opening. I'd been back there to get some ammunition and couldn't use it. But anyway, we got the meal and loaded our guns and went back there. And then we were open to fire, and we lit up the sky there for a while. And troops out in front of us said that fire had been very effective and evidently caught the Jap by surprise, and there was a lot of them dead out there when we got through. But we laid down a pretty good barrage. We didn't. That's one thing about American troops. We tried to see that the other man died for his country.
Right.
And it works. I mean, we'd lay a barrage out there to prevent them from shooting at us, and also to take them out. It works. But anyway, that went on for, as I said, about 4 or 5 days, and they packed up and left. The Jap did. I didn't know they had gone. And I lost one man in my battery, and I think a couple of them were injured, that's all. I lost one man that was killed by our own gun. Mm-hmm. And that was a sad thing. He evidently passed out during the night. It was night fire, and we didn't have any lights. Can't use them. And the gunners have little pin lights. They'd set their sights and so forth. We all surmised that this guy had either blacked out, passed out, fainted or something, but he fell across the trail of the gun, and the gunner didn't see him, and he fired that thing, and of course that recoil comes back about 16, 18 inches.
Yeah. And
just caved his head in. It was really, he's one of everybody's favorite, of course. Everybody loved that boy. But anyway, we lost him there. And that thing was over with, and we went back on the trail and got back with the main unit and kept on going. Stayed on the hogbacks. Those Kachin Rangers were good guides. We had a problem with them. We took them in the Army there when they were 14 years old. They were considered mature men because they had lived to be over 35 anyhow. Mm. And we used those little boogers, and they were short, small people, and we gave them into their choice of weapon, whatever they wanted. And all of them had a bolo, a big old machete knife on their back. We call them machetes, but theirs were a little bit stronger than machete. Most of them were two-handed axes, sharp blade. And most of those guys chose a submachine gun. Thompson submachine gun. That was what they wanted. Well, that's what they got. The only problem with it was that we went down to, going down through the country, we began to get into the country, that part of the world that the Kachin people were not allowed because their natural enemy was there, the Shan race. And the Shans, of course, were unarmed, and these guys took advantage of an opportunity. And boy, they were out in front. And they used those machine guns on those natives, and we had no idea that we couldn't make them stop. They'd say, well, they tried to kill us. No, they didn't. They didn't have anything but a stick. But anyway, it wasn't a serious thing, and they did kill a few. And the Shans got a message. However, they get messages in the jungle. But they just they went back into the hills and the mountains and the valleys and their hiding places and stayed there till we got through and got out of there and saved their life. We'd had water on top of those mountains. I remember one time we went for a long time without water. The men their canteens were all empty. The mules hadn't had water. And the only water on that trail was a little mountain stream coming off of a rock. We watered people and mules all night long at that one spot. And it was so crowded there that you had to take one mule at a time up, and he'd drink out of that puddle until he had his fill. And he'd turn and come back, and the next mule would go in. We filled our canteens about the same way. But anyway, they got a drink. Everybody did, and the mules too. And that took the better part of the next day to get out of there. We got on down to, getting close to Burma Road. And we had to be quiet because we were trying to get the element of surprise, and I didn't see how we could surprise anybody with that many troops and things. And anyway, we got down there and not too far from the road, maybe 8, 9, 10 miles. But meantime, before we got that close, we marched. We got up one morning at 5 o'clock and started. And we marched, and I thought, well, surely we're going to stop pretty quick because we were all dragging. And the word came back, the colonel told us to take a 15-minute break, but don't unload the mules and don't unload your pack. So that's what we did. We just fell down and went rested. And we had been marching about 14 miles over the top of those ridges, and we were really pooped. Anyway, I went to sleep, and I didn't know it, but I rolled off that mountain down there about 20 feet. And I heard them, the men were talking, and the mules began to move around, and I thought, oh, what the hell? And I looked all around, I didn't see anybody. Then I saw up above, so I climbed back up there. And we marched 22 hours without stopping on that last leg. And then we were ordered into position and to start firing. Well, you did what you had to do, and so we did. And we lit up and started in shooting and zeroed our guns in and put out all of our equipment, and everybody was pretty well dug in by then. And the next day, I don't know where the Japs got it, but they got a dadgum 155 howitzer, a big old gun, and they stayed off back out there about 6 miles, and we couldn't reach them. It lobbed them little big shells in on us. And wasn't much we could do about it, but one man in the B battery, he took 6 mules, and they loaded those 6 mules with the cannon. And he took the crew to unload and fire. And they worked their way down through the infantry until they could see that cannon. And they unloaded that gun mule. And those boys got in there and they got zeroed in on that cannon. And they fired that thing. I think he said he fired about 8 rounds. And they hit the ammunition dump, they hit the cannon, they hit all in there and just blew things all to hell around. And he had an incendiary grenade in his hand that he had ready in case they got in trouble. So he told those boys, he said, let's get the hell out of here. And he just flipped that grenade down that gun barrel to deactivate that gun forever.
They weren't going to mess with trying to haul it off.
No way. No way he could do it because those bastards were getting after us already. And old Mo Ryan from Missouri is the one that did that. And that was a neat trick he pulled, and it worked. And he got that big old gun out of action. But if they had done a certain amount of damage, I had lost 2 men and 2 or 3 wounded from it. And one shell burst hit within 30 feet of us in a tree. And I heard it coming. And you got a few seconds on that thing. So I told him, I said, hit the hole. And I ran and I hit my hole, and that thing exploded and just blew me on down in the hole.
Oh my God.
And I come out right quick to see if anybody was hurt. And this one guy had a piece of shrapnel hit him in the back, and he was pretty bloody, and it had crushed his glasses. He wore glasses. And he was fumbling around down on the ground, and he said, "Where's my glasses?" I said, "Don't worry about your glasses." I said, "You'll get you some more. I got to get you to the hospital." So I got him up there to old Doc Crosby. And meantime, we just kept on shooting, you know. I mean, got him up there to old Doc Crosby, and he put him in one of those liaison planes and flew him back to a better place where they could treat him. And that's how it all began. And then we fought there for, I believe it was 53 days. Yeah, the actual shooting before they retreated. And the cavalry had moved in on one flank, and the 476th Infantry was our group one colonel battalion took his hill almost immediately. They assigned those things by hill. This battalion takes this one, this battalion takes this one. Well, we supported Colonel Jonsson on that hill over there, and he asked for it. We had an officer up front directing fire, and we fired good, and B battery fired, and I was C battery, and we fired, and A battery fired. All of us were helping him. And he took his hills, and I think he lost like 3 or 4 men on that. But he said they were addled and, you know, just kind of walking around like they didn't know where they were. They were easy targets. But that artillery fire that we laid in there on them, just, you know, just devastating. Mm-hmm. Even if you don't get hit, you get to where you don't give a damn. But anyway, that happened, and he got his hill and moved on. He moved back and took it and secured it. The one right in front of me, that guy had lost he had attacked it. He had attacked that hill, and he emphatically told us not to fire our guns. I told Captain, I said, Captain, what's the matter? Did we do something wrong? He said, no. He said, that guy thinks he's going to run up that hill and take it. Well, he ordered those people to do that, and of course the troops did what they were told, and he would lose, wounded and killed, he'd lose 4 or 5% of his troops, and he made 3 runs to that hill and came out losing 20 to 25% of his troops. Just so that colonel that took his hills early, he came over. The other colonel was relieved. And this guy came over, and he said, I'm going to take the... Hello? Yes? All right. And he said, can you support me? I said, I'll give you all I got. He said, well, that's fine. Come on down here and let's talk. So we went down there, and the colonel, my colonel, his colonel, him, all of us sat there, and he was very frank. He said, can you do this and so? And can you put a round within 50 yards? I said, yeah, I can put them closer than that if you want it. No, he said, I think that'll do. That'll be good. He said, you got plenty of ammunition. I said, well, we can lay that in. If we got time, we'll get it. We can put some mules on the road carrying it. They dropped it to us by air. Everything we got was dropped from air.
Did you get any like bombing support? I mean, anything like that, or was it just supplies?
We had one time we got some, they had 11 planes fly over us and dropped a bunch of bombs out there in front where we had been fighting that we couldn't reach, in the area we couldn't reach with our artillery. And it looked like we had the whole Air Force there. It's the first time we'd seen an airplane like that, you know, big old thing. All we'd ever seen was those little cargo planes, which were dropping our food and supplies and our mule feed and so forth, and ammunition, and gun parts and guns when we need them.
Are those the same flights that they refer to as flying that hump, or that's the same?
Right.
That's the same thing.
No,
No.
the hump flying came later,
Okay.
after the Burma Road was open and secure. Then we flew the hump and went into China.
Okay.
But that's a long step. That's a high hump. And Colonel, I don't know how many rounds I fired, several hundred rounds. I moved my gun position over where I wouldn't be interrupted. And I moved that day over and took a little defilade behind that hill. I had a valley down below me, less than 50 feet. So I felt pretty comfortable about it, because if they tried to shoot me with those howitzers, they would go over me, because they had to clear the mountain in front of me. Mm-hmm. And as they did that, they'd fall in that valley below me. And as it worked out, it was pretty well right, because they tried with their guns, and we'd hear them exploding down below us. So we never were interrupted. But we started out, the colonel told me, he said, well, I'll give you the order to fire, and we'll have a man with us, and by phone we'll tell you exactly what we want you to do. And I said, well, that's fine. Just give me an artillery observer. I don't want you to try to tell me over the phone, because I want to understand what you're saying, and you won't understand what we're doing. Oh, he said, we're going to take liaison man with us. I said, all right. But anyway, he came by the next morning, that night, and he said, we're jumping off in the morning, and I'll let you know when. You just be ready, and we're going to leave out before daylight. I said, well, that's fine. We're all set up and zeroed in, and their guns are laid. So he gave me the order to fire. And I had told him, I said, well, now on the initial fire, we always fire one round with one gun. And all the other guns will be parallel to it. So I had number 4 fire, number 1 gun fire, one round when he ordered to fire. He said, man, that's perfect. I said, well, I'm going to lay 5 rounds right in on top of that with the whole battery. He said, fine. So I opened up with the battery. I always fired at my command, because if I let them fire it well, that's a gun going off, then another one, then maybe 2. You never know when they get through. Mm-hmm. And you never know when if one gun's out. So I had them fire at my command all the time. And each one of them would raise a hand when they're ready, and all 4 guns were ready, I'd tell them to fire. And then I was ready to set all 4 guns in action. But anyway, I was unfortunate in having one gun that was out, and I didn't see it until they, I can't remember who it was. I think it's maybe that colonel out in front. No, it's liaison officer called, and he said, you got one gun out that hit pretty close to us here, and that shot went through the lieutenant's jacket. I said, oh my God. So anyway, I just looked at my gun and I said, number 4, check deflection. And he checked his deflection. He was 100 mils out.
Oh, God.
So I told him, I said, we get the deflection from number 1 and take that and put it on your gun. And he did. And then all 4 guns were synchronized. So I raked that area. 5 rounds, I'd hit 5, walk it up. He told me, he said, just walk it up 50 yards and then back down. So I'd run and then he got to where he wanted 50 feet. Well, you know, we can come close to it. So we moved that fire that close to those troops, our infantry. We raked one area good, and then we'd move over and overlap a little bit and rake another area, and those troops were moving all the time under that fire. Well, by the time they called in about an hour, and we had fired like 600-700 rounds in there. It wasn't a big hill, it was a small area. And we had already moved down to near the end of the hill. And I didn't realize that those troops were coming right on in behind us, just as fast as they could. We'd move, when we move our fire, they'd move up. And then they had me climbing, going up further range out. And I thought, well, they're doing all right. They're moving way on up. So I got to where I was hitting close to the top of those hills, and I could see the fire. I was right below it. Then the colonel says, cease fire. He says, at that time, the popular song on radio and television, radio, wasn't it, television? Do nothing till you hear from me. So that's the best news I had heard whenever he said, I'm standing on the hill looking at the Burma Road, and you do nothing till you hear from me. This one's over. And that just tickled the hell out of me, but he took that hill, and he never lost a man. And he said those Japs were so easy to take. When they come out of their foxholes and things, they just walk around the days.
Would they take him prisoner? Mm-hmm. Would they take them prisoner at that point?
If they weren't resisting, if they wanted to surrender, they could. We occasionally had some prisoners, but most of them didn't opt to surrender. they never offered to surrender. They'd either run or they would fire. And either way, they got it,
Yeah.
unless they offered to surrender. No, we had surrendered prisoners from various times, but that was about the end of that campaign, and we were all happy when the road was secured. And about 4 days later, we went on down to Lashio, Burma, and went on the road, right down the road. And we began to see vehicles for the first time in about 4 months.
What was the date at which it was secured? What is this?
I don't recall those dates.
I mean, not the exact date, but is it still? It's not still 42, is it?
Yeah,
It's
we're still and it was like in January. We were over in the Tonka area in December, and it was between January, February, along in there. I don't know exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't killed up there on that where I was. We only lost 2 men killed, and I think 4 or 5 injured. Is all.
Wow.
We were very fortunate, but I feel like that selected the gun position where you could defend it and be reasonably secure, the best security you could get, helped an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
And those troops, those boys, were all resourceful people. They had ability to survive. They had the will to fight. I mean, it was a perfect situation for the American troops.
Mm-hmm.
I admired one of them. They were good.
What just one?
Song.
Oh my gosh.
But I was so glad to get back off that trip. I don't think it won't scare you, because it did.
Mm.
Wasn't any reason to be, because there wasn't anything there, but there was a potential.
Mm-hmm. So, when did you? If this is around first the year 43 or so, is that what you said? Okay, and then where were you off to after that?
Well, we stayed in, we went on down the road to Lashio, Burma. Lashio, we stopped there because they had an airstrip that would accommodate those C-47s. And we loaded our, well, I didn't have anything to do with it. But the veterinarians were to take those mules and walk them back into China, which meant they had to negotiate those mountains again over the hump and so forth. That was a treacherous, long, hopeless thing to even attempt. And they were very fortunate. The cadre and the veterinarians that were with those mules, the veterinarians discovered that they had Glander's disease, which is contagious to humans. Well, they couldn't take a risk on that moment on. So they had to dispose of every mule
Oh no.
with the 45. And they did it. And those boys in the troops, they said, well, I'm glad they did it, not me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Gosh.
But anyway, it was a blessing for the mules,
Mm-hmm.
because the Chinese would have abused them tremendously until they died.
Really?
It would have just been a total sacrifice of life, because the Chinese would not feed them, they would not care for them, they would not heal them, they wouldn't do anything.
Really?
get what they could out of them and let them go.
Mm.
That's ended that part of it, and we got on the C-47s in and flew the hump into China. And we stayed around that camp for a couple of weeks. The major that I had never seen before, I have forgotten his name now, he was a Mormon from Utah. And PSC Goats and myself were assigned to a Chinese regiment, mechanized, automobiles and trucks and motorized artillery and all that kind of stuff. Well, it was a hopeless thing to try to handle the Chinese because they were so ineffective and inefficient as far as we were concerned, that it was kind of a hopeless thing to think that you could win a war with them. And the only thing there is you had the Japanese outnumbered by a few billion or something, I don't know. But anyway, we left there and we went on down the road. From Kunming we went down to Guiyang. We went to the motor pool first and got us all a vehicle. And I chose a weapons carrier. They had some new ones there, and I just got a new weapons carrier with four-wheel drive. And they said, "Do you want some barrels for spare gasoline?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I have some other troops down the road," and I didn't have any. And they went off without any, and they told me to bring them some too. So I loaded up 6 barrels. And I'd go get some gasoline, and I got 2 of them full of gasoline, and strapped them into my weapons carrier in case I needed some gasoline. And then I got 2 into the majors, I got 2 into the other guy, and I told them both, I said, "Now look, if we get in a tight spot, the Japanese will overrun these Chinese in less than an hour. The battle will be over. And y'all have enough gasoline and you keep your tanks full where we can get way on the back up the road where we come from. Because we can't stay here and depend on those people to defend us." We were practically unarmed. But we fought with those Chinese and tried to train them, and they resisted everything we did. And every once in a while I had to go back and get the payroll for the whole regiment of Chinese. Well, of course they paid them off in Chinese money, that CNC money. And I'd take a 6x6 truck and go back to where the money was at Kunming and load that thing, and whenever I got enough for those troops for payroll, the truck was full with $500,000 bill. Of course that old money wasn't worth anything. I think we were exchange was 3,000 Chinese dollars for 1 American.
Gosh.
So, and the Chinese, this is how self-dependent they are, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what you call it, but they were offended because I'm paying them. I said, "Look, I'm not paying you anything. This is your money. It belongs to your government. I'm just a carrier." Well, it eased the pain a little bit, but he didn't want to lose face by taking American money and all that kind of garbage. And this went on part of our trip the whole way. While we were at Guiyang, and this was getting late, and I guess in 44 or 5, Anyway, we were supposed to jump off and go to Canton with our mission. And we'd have a night maneuver for those Chinese and told them there'd be no lights turned on and this, that, and the other, and we're going to take the guns out and we're going to go into position in the dark. Well, I'm telling you, we'd get all up there and we'd give the signal over the radio or something that we were going to go into position and occupy this ridge on the right. And I'm telling you, the lights would come on, the hollering would start, and it would just, it just pandemonium. And they'd run into each other, they'd wreck their vehicle. I told that major, I said, Major, are you satisfied you want to stay here and fight with these people? You just empty your gasoline, I'm going to keep mine. And so anyway, that went on 2 or 3 trips. We just kind of gave up and hoped for the best, because it was impossible to train them that quick. And my roommate from college, Max Rothold, was down at Canton in a scrimmage with those Japanese at the time. Now, I didn't know it. So I went back to the headquarters up the road to get our PX rations, which was the enlisted men that was with us got a case of beer, and the officers got a case of beer and a bottle of bourbon. Well, I went back up there and I got that for me, and then this Mormon I had with me, he didn't touch the stuff, so I got his. And I looked over there and here was these peaches, gallons of peaches. God, what a feast that would be. And I said, what are those peaches doing up there? He said, oh, that's those people down the road there about 150 miles. They haven't have come back for them yet. And I got to looking over there, and one of them can there had Max Rothold on it, my roommate. I said, well, I know I'm going back down there pretty soon. I said, Rothold, he wants his bourbon, and he wants his beer, and he wants his peaches. They said, well, we'll be glad to get rid of them. And they just, I got all those rations. Took off and went back down there. And, we never did get down to that battle, though, and thank God for that. And we were ordered back to the headquarters, and we had heard already over the news that the atomic bombs had been dropped a week before or something, that the Japanese were considering surrender, and so we were just kind of in limbo waiting. And sure enough, they did surrender. We were ordered back to Kunming and take a new vehicle with us so we could turn it in. So I went down and I got a brand new Studebaker truck. I was ready to go. I had my toothbrush and stuff with me. Full Colonel was going to lead the column. And man, he just never led a column before. So he started out and he was driving about 40 miles an hour. And I was up within, it wasn't but about 15 trucks in front of me. There was about 200 behind me. And you can look back, Scott, and for miles those trucks there were gaps in them, they were slow, they were fast. And I thought, this is going to be chaotic before it's over with. So I got on up the road, and Colonel had a flat, and he was off the side of the road. And they were waving these trucks on by, and there wasn't but 3 by that time in front of me. So they waved us on by, and we got up there to a wide place road, and they pulled over. I pulled up beside and said, what's the matter? He said, well, we're going to rest a minute. I said, well, I'm going to take the call and go on. Man, I'm telling you, I lit a fire under that thing. And I was driving 50 miles, 60 miles an hour over those old gravel roads, and I got to Kunming. There was, I can't tell you how far they're at last one. It was late the next day before the next last one got there.
Oh my gosh.
It was pathetic. But that column was wide gaps in it.
Oh.
I got there. The war was over. And the Japanese had surrendered. And the general told me that I was to take a plane, take my personal items, take this plane out of Kunming with a small group. There was a lady who was also a captain at that time, but I'd already made captain back in Burma. There was a lady who was a Captain Whack, and 8 or 10 enlisted men. And we were headed for Shanghai. The war was over, so what would it hurt? So we got to Shanghai and got to the airport, and I was sick as a mule. I had pneumonia. I didn't know it. So I checked into the hospital out there to see if I could see what was wrong, get me some medicine. I got out there, and I met the nurse, and I said, "Is this the hospital?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Where is everybody?" She said, "Well, the Chinese have already started fighting, and we hear their guns shooting back there, and the general ordered all the patients and most of the doctors to get on a plane and fly to the United States." I said, "Lady, if you just give me my toothbrush back, I'll catch that plane." She says, "No, I've gotten a message here in the last hour that says that we're to accept patients again, and you're the first one." Oh my God, just my luck. If I'd have been there 2 hours before, I'd been on a plane going out of there.
Oh gosh.
So anyway, I stayed there about 4 or 5 days and got over it right quick. I had yellow jaundice later. I went on out to the airport then. That was where I was supposed to go to get my instructions. And I went out there, and who was sitting there on his suitcase was old Max Rotho, my roommate. I said, "Where in the hell are you going?" He said, "Man, I'm getting on that next airplane. It's coming in right now." And it was just coming down. They went down, turned around. We visited for like 10 minutes, and that guy taxied up there. And he said, "I'll see you back to the States. I'm gone." Yeah, oh my God. I'm sorry I stole your whiskey and peaches. But anyway, that was the way it worked. And I went on downtown, and we had headquarters set up in a hotel down there. Japanese were not all impounded yet. There were soldiers everywhere. And finally got them all gathered up. Then the general told me that I was to help the oil companies get their equipment back. Had Saucony and Exxon, that time it was Magnolia Oil Company, and Texaco, and Eastern, and then some of those British companies in Shanghai. And I was to help them get their equipment back. Well, how do you help somebody in a city here of 8 million or 12 million people? How the hell are you going to find? And there wasn't any way. So I fooled with that for a while, and I started talking to some of those Japanese and asked them what they had done with this stuff. And I finally got told for the captain. He said, "Well, I don't know," but he said, "I've been in Shanghai here ever since this thing started," and said, "Major so-and-so, some Japanese name, he's got a list of everything that was moved off of these places and where it went." I said, "Well, that's the man I want. Get him out here." And you know that son of a gun did have, he had a list of huge fuel tanks and gasoline pumps and all that stuff, everything that was moved. He had a list of where it was.
Mm.
Well, all the British companies were hit with bombs pretty bad because the American troops had been close enough for several days and weeks and months to bomb them. And they went in there and they bombed the hell out of them. But they bombed the British less than 600 feet would be an American Texaco or something. They didn't touch it. It was really. So I always thought it was. I thought it was funny. Those British didn't think it was so funny. But I took that list and I met with them and they all made a copy of it. They felt satisfied that they could get back whatever there was left there. And I said, well, you just have to get it because I don't know anything about digging up these tanks and things. So you're on your own. Here's a list of where they are. Then I stayed there for 3 or 4 more months. They made me supply officer then for the whole area of Shanghai. I had a warehouse I imagined had 50,000 square feet of floor space in it, 15-foot ceilings, and we had it stacked full of American merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
Had nothing to do with it. Nobody needed it. Nobody wanted it. But I give out what they'd come for. They want beds or quilts or coats or parkas or all that stuff. I had it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, about 3 months later, I got notice that I was eligible to come home. And I had heard that the USS General Butler was coming into port. And it could only take 1,200 people, but I was in that 1,200. I said, well, then what'd they do? Chop that thing in two? It brought 5,000 over you. No, he said, you have better accommodations going home. And they had staterooms and all that stuff then. It was luxury.
So you went back home on the same ship?
Yeah, so I went kind of through the warehouse there and I got a couple of those fur-lined parka down coats, beautiful warm things. And I got a couple of those that never been on anybody's back, still sitting in there. And I took them out of the case and I pulled one of those foot lockers over there, about that big, that deep. I laid them in there and I went down and got 2 of those M1 carbines, put them in there, still in cosmoline, and 2 .45 automatic pistols, put them in there. And I had a Japanese sword that I had acquired over in the jungle, and put it in there. Then I took and spread some other goodies on top of it, and took that booger down to the dock the day I was supposed to go. While we were waiting to leave, somebody said, boy, he said, you sure got to be careful if you got anything in that pack in your satchel that belongs to the U.S. government, you better get rid of it because they won't let you get on that ship. I could have cried. I went down through there. Right there beside my feet was that suitcase, that footlocker I had packed. And all I had to do was take hold of it. Mm-hmm. And that guy, anybody would help me carry it on. And I never did even look at it. I just walked right on by it.
Oh, no.
Left it sit there. I went through the whole thing and got on the ship and everything else. And there wasn't anybody to this day looked or asked me if I had anything.
Oh.
Yeah, I could have brought it all home with me. It was a
Oh man.
lost cause trying to be a thief.
So is it 1946 by the time you get
Yeah.
back?
Yeah. Yeah, we came back into California, and let's see, I believe I caught a plane. They were still ferrying these planes back and forth across the country trying to get them to where they belong. And I caught an Army plane, they took about 15, 20 of us and gave us a ride, and they stopped in El Paso, which was fine for me. And then those other people on there from San Antonio and Abilene and all over.
Mm-hmm.
And it was fine for us to stop in El Paso, and I went to El Paso, and then they had a van meet us and carry us down to the place where you get out of the service. I mean, you get terminal leave. Of course, I had like 60, 90 days that I could go off and come back and still be in the Army, but we had an option there to either take the leave and come back. And Colonel there told me, he said, you'll get an automatic promotion. He said, the day you come back and sign up and everything, they'll give you a gold leaf to wear on your collar instead of that bar. And damn, that'd be all right, but it ain't worth it, Colonel. I said, I believe I'm just going to take my terminal leave and let it be that, because I don't believe I'm going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did. And I got down there and got mustered out and got out on the highway, and I didn't either, right there in the camp. Those people had been told in town and around the service stations there was all kinds of information for travelers that the troops were coming home and everything, if you could help them be good. And these people that need a ride are out there around camp so-and-so. And so they did. They would drive out there and they'd say, does anybody here want to go to San Antonio? Or anybody here want to go to Wichita Falls? Or wherever. And one of them came back going to Houston. I said, I'm not going to Houston, but I'll get off in Uvalde. You know that bugger, that's the way I got home. I caught a ride with him, and I remember he was driving up around 55 miles an hour, just scared the daylights out of me. Go that fast in that little vehicle. And he finally got tired about 100 miles out, and he said, do you want to drive a while? And I said, yeah, I'll drive. So I got over and I started driving, and I drive around 45 and felt good. I got on up 50. Sure enough, in less than 5 miles, I was up to 60 miles an hour just sailing down the road. And we did that all the way to Uvalde, and he'd wake up and say, I think I'll drive a while, and he'd drive, and he'd let me drive again. Got to Uvalde, I went to Kincaid Hotel and thought I'd clean up a little before I went home. Called my brother, and he come and got me. I guess I could have probably caught a ride down there quicker than he could come up there. In those days, boy, I tell you, you could get a ride. When I was in school, we hitchhiked rather than ride the bus. Mm-hmm. It was so much faster. Mm-hmm. I'd been out on that highway coming out of Houston, Scott, maybe we were going to Dallas or something. There may be 50 Aggies in the line out there. You just get in line, you put your bag down, you could go off and sit down, and the guy'd move it up for you. Mm-hmm. And so every once in a while they'd holler back down the line and say, anybody want to go to Corsicana? And some of them didn't want to go. They'd want to go all the way to Dallas or not at all. Yeah, I'll go. You know, and I'd just take anything I'd get. But anyway, in those days, there was no fear of burglars or robbers or anything else. People just pick you up. Even the women would stop and pick them up. They were very comfortable.
Well, now, were you married before you left for the
No.
war? Okay.
No.
And so you came back to Crystal in 1946.
Yeah.
Been here ever since.
It's been here ever since.
Well, I thought I heard you early on say that. Have you gone to like some reunions and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. And you
Yeah,
still.
I went to 3 reunions of that group I was with in Burma. And as I say, I hope to go to that one in Phoenix this year. It's over at Scottsdale, Arizona. It's probably the last one they're going to have, because most of the people that we were over there with have died off. And there's not even a couple of us left hardly. But they seem to think that this may be the last time we'll be able to get together as a unit or a group, and after that it'll be 2 or 3 of us get together whenever we can. But yeah, there's not a whole lot, and those of us that are left are crippled or carrying a cane or full of cancer or something, so it's difficult. And it's time for us to pull our horns in anyhow.
Well, since all this time has passed, have you been back to India or been back to that area? Or
no, I haven't had any desire to go back.
don't care to?
Although it would be an enormous, beautiful place to develop. Teakwood forests over there, I've seen teakwood forests, that very valuable wood. Trees like 10 feet apart, 150 foot high, just straight as an arrow. And just, we'd tie our mules in there, go from tree to tree with a picket line, and then tie our mules on that line. And stay in there, and we had that. And in the teakwood forest, there were these huge mahoganies. And that wood burns better than mesquite. You could light that wood, and it was so hard and everything. If you had a stump this big, you could light that bugger, and it'd burn all night and the next day, and then you had to throw water on it. It was still glowing. It was just great for firewood, but very valuable for wood too. But yeah, orchids and bananas and gorillas and monkeys and elephants.
Yeah.
It's all over there, and it's just waiting to be developed.
Well, now, how did Mr. Stalling get down here to Crystal?
Well, I talked he and Max into coming down here, and told them we ought to get in the ranching business. And so we went at it exactly backwards. We should never have done what we did, but Max's folks had some money, and we couldn't resist taking it. And we started out buying land, and that's a mistake. You can't be poor and buy land.
Right.
But Mr. Box, Ian Box, he sold us 2 sections over here, dirt cheap. There where that old Hope and Murphy farm was, and that part of Del Monte, and back on this side, Coleman Farms right next door. We bought 2 sections there adjoining Holdsworth, and jumped in there and cleared 200 or 300 acres and drilled 2 water wells and all that expensive stuff, you know. And we still didn't know what we're doing. And tried to grow spinach, and we'd grow it, but you couldn't sell it, and we didn't know you couldn't sell it. It was not a good thing. Had we gone on and rented a place or something, it would have been great. We could have worked our way into it and learned the business before we got jumped in. But anyway, that's how they got here. I asked him to come down, and of course Hal fell in love with Jean Brown and married her, and that's it for him. And Max, he sold all that stuff, and his mother didn't lose any money on it because Mr. Box had sold it to us so reasonable that he was able to sell it, get out from under it. But I didn't want to buy anything then. I found out that you can't buy with hopes of ever paying it back. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. So I worked around here, different things, and finally got hold of that Sturt Ranch out there, mm-hmm. which we should have been doing in the first place. We've been leasing like that. And that worked out very, very well. But by then, Hal had already established the business, and he wasn't interested in the ranch. So Max and I had that ranch to ourselves. And it worked out.
Mm-hmm. Well,
it got to where we couldn't handle it, and I was getting too old and had those brain tumors and things that I had to contend with, and I'm still suffering from them. But I couldn't handle the ranching business, so we sold out and let it go. All I've got left now is this 300 acres here and another 150 over there on the highway.
Well, it's just as kind of a general wrap-up question or whatever. Do you think like how often would you say you think of your experiences over there? Is it something you think about quite a bit, or is it just passing?
Oh yeah, I think about them quite often, and I keep thinking about the guys who were over there and the ones that were lost, and yeah, I think about it quite often and wonder how we got it done. So really, because it seemed like an almost impossible task. But there again, the Army has a way. Stick with them. They'll get it done. Mm-hmm. They'll get it done. They may go around the moon to get to the next block, but they'll get there. They got a lot of things to think about that we down below didn't ever think about. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of planning and strategy and things that have to be worked into those things. Mm-hmm. To save lives and save equipment and to win the victory. Mm-hmm. It takes a whole lot. So don't sell them short.
Sounds like you had some real good leadership then.
You bet. You bet. Leadership and mostly the knowledge of the troops that have to do it. Mm-hmm. Our generation, we came up whenever I worked mules out here plowing and things. We didn't have a tractor. We worked this place for about 3 years without a tractor. Mm-hmm. Dad made a little money on spinach one year, and we went off and bought a little tractor. Man, I thought we owned the world then. Had wheels. We'd run that Dexter plowing down here. I'd plow all day with that thing and then park it over here on the water well. It had a belt pulley on it. I'd put the pulley on it and fill it full of fuel and start that water to pumping. It didn't take but about 20 horsepower. The water right near the surface. Mm. Sat there and pull that clutch on and let that motor run all night long. The next day I filled it up without even turning it off, put the plow on it, and go back to work. But we knew how to do things, and we get them done. And that's great help. You know, people that don't have to do anything for themselves, they got it all bought from Walmart and handed to them. They don't know what it's like to have to manage, entertain yourself rather than be entertained all your life. So the group, our generation really was that kind. And I'm not talking about here, I'm talking about all over the United States. That was 1920, and the Depression ended about 1928, 29, and 30. So we were 8, 9, 10 years old before it was over. And that was a bugger. I ate lots of oatmeal and lots of beans. But we did well. I mean, we had our own milk, cows, raised calf every year, butchered 2 or 3 hogs to eat. All worked out pretty good. Yard full of chicken. Eat chickens and eggs.
Well, I really appreciate your time. This has
Well,
been most
fine.
enlightening.
You know, there's just so much. Before you get to town, I'll think of 100 things that I could have talked about that would have been funny and stuff. We had lots of incidents and lots of things to entertain us.
Well, it was an extraordinary accomplishment. I mean, to do all the things that.
Well, it wasn't not on our part particularly, but the whole picture of everything. You've never, in other words, there's some things. Some things that I can't fathom. Now, this is these are some things that my brother had in his knapsack. Now, let me see if I can orient this thing. This is the interior ship caused by torpedo in Leyte Gulf in October the 20th and 44. Now I can't tell which is the top and which is the bottom on that thing.
Oh my gosh! I believe this is the
That's
top.
that's
there's
a
man.
hole in
There's
the ship.
man standing there.
Is there a man standing there? Okay, it gives you an idea of how big that hole was. Now, that ship didn't sink. And here they are repairing it. Here's a picture of 88 feet of this ship was blown off by torpedo, and that was in the Kula Gulf in 43.
Oh my gosh!
Now that ship went on into Pearl Harbor and was reconditioned, and they put it back in the water in about 90 days. Here's what remains of a bedroom on that ship. And here's those big guns they use. Is the bombardment at Guam in 44. 5-inch cases in water, rapid fire, 4 5-inch guns, and 15 6-inch guns. But now that's off the 43.
43. Class of 43, and this is class of 93, so that's 50 years later. Just a bit worn. 50 years difference.
I've had this one re-shanked down here 3 times. Wear out and come into.
Wow. Never misplaced it or anything? Never misplaced it or?
Yeah, I lost it once out at the ranch there working cattle, and I was palpating some cows for pregnancy, and I pulled my ring off and put those gloves on. I put it in my pocket. Then I went over and started spraying the cattle with a spray rig. Inadvertently, somehow or other, I reached in my pocket and pulled a handkerchief out or something, and it fell out. Well, I'll tell you what, I got a metal detector, and I went out there and found all the doggone little pull cans and 7-Up cans. I never saw as many little needles and things in that. I don't know, I've looked for about 3 days. About ready to give up, and I said, let's see. The last thing I did that day